BlameF is always a highly talked about player in Counter-Strike. Even when he's on the bench, I think he's worth discussing because a lot of people are wondering if BlameF is the problem. You look at his career and it doesn't look great on paper. Actually, his results in tournaments are nowhere near as good as you would maybe expect from a player of his caliber. Hasn't ever really won S-tier tournaments except for a blast back in 2020. With Astralis, this lineup never really won anything of note, only making it to quarterfinals and semi-finals at best. And now, Astralis, ever since they benched him, have actually been playing pretty damn well. Over at Chengdu, they got to phase in the semi-final, I believe, where they took a loss. And now at Pro League, they have started off very strong. We'll see if they can keep that up into the playoffs. But it's actually looking good for Astralis. And that's despite the fact BlameF was putting up good numbers and has put up good numbers throughout his entire career at big events. This guy has never had a bad rating at a big event, but yet he's never really been able to get the results. Some of these performances, I think, are undeniably impressive, okay? Cologne 2022, he had a 1.29 rating, basically carrying his team to the semifinals of that event. There's a couple of other ones in here that are definitely impressive as well. But I wanted to go through a quick retrospective of BlameF's career and then figure out what exactly has gone wrong for him and what's led him to this point. We're starting back on the heroic days
of the AK-47.
Sorry, this is the complexity plays. We're skipping the heroic days, but the complexity days when BlameF was on this international roster. And if you listen closely, I am technically, I have to say technically, casting in this clip, okay?
Down, delivering from behind, flanking with an AWP. This is brilliant. And while BlameF now with it all to do, he's got 2 kills and 2 more to find with 8 seconds left. That becomes impossible, but they're both running at him. What are they doing? There's only a couple of seconds to fall away. Don't give him the chance, and what have they done? BlameF pulls it off.
Right, that is an all-time throw from Heroic. I don't know what they're doing there. But clearly, I made the clip there with my amazing commentary of, ooh, and oh, just great work from me as always. You know, it's just actually incredible from me. But then we also have moving on to more times in his complexity days when he was doing really well for this team. He was fragging great. He was carrying a lot of the time. I mean, look, this is a proper random lineup with NATO, Sapphix, Poison. A lot of players that haven't really stuck around.
A couple of flashes to work with. It's the A all in.
It's so brave from Blame. He's just flashed to have a look, and I think he's confirmed his suspicions. The nade is very promising. And here we go. Isikinda meets Poison, does best him. A chance! They all line up on the BlameF. FAMAS 3. He has the AK. The flashes from his team have bought him time. He's ready and unloads into another. Looking for the ace, and he sends them packing. VP are broken.
Very nicely done. Deserves the celebration back in the online days. And of course, BlameF is someone who has had a lot of the best times of his career actually during this online period. In 2020, he was ranked 6th in the world, but he kept it up even when we came back to the LAN days, you know, 13th in 2021 as well, 12th in 2022, 16th in 2023. This is a player that in theory should be in very high demand, you would think. But he's been benched on Astralis. We haven't really heard any rumors. And now, of course, I'm going to let Apex hit the nail on the head as to why maybe some people don't like BlameF as a player.
Oh, Blame! Please, yes, man! Stop beating everyone! Come on!
I mean, you gotta love Apex. I love it when people are so just authentically themselves, and I feel like you can tell that with Apex. He's never holding back how he truly feels, which is great. But that is always the question, you know, is BlameF a beta? You see here, top 20 players, he was number 6. First time ever on the top 20. He comes in at number 6. People were so hyped for him at this time, you know, better than Nico or close to Nico and Electronic. These players that were very good. And a lot of people actually thought BlameF could go on to be an all-time great at this time, right? First year in Tier 1, 6th best player in the world. People couldn't actually believe this at the time. You know, some of the other players that have done this, coldzera, ZywOo, Fallen coming in early in their careers, and all these players that have gone on to have great careers. Okay, maybe not Breezy. Maybe he's the one that doesn't exactly stick in there. But these are a lot of names that had incredible Counter-Strike careers. Now, of course, the complexity days are a lot of fun for other reasons as well.
Coming out from complexity.
I think
The build difference between Obo and BlameF, as a fellow skinny boy, I would not want to be sitting next to this man.
on your screen at the moment.
Oh god, Blame, chill, man. Chill, okay? Chill. That is not necessary. But he's, and again, a player who can literally put up an MVP performance in a tournament Astralis didn't even win. And I think, really, I want to get into some more in-depth discussion now, because on Astralis, he went back to the in-game leader role, something he had done in the past on previous teams, but it's never felt like BlameF wanted to commit to this role. And I think maybe in the past, you know, over on Complexity, it was something worth trying out that he was interested in, because it felt like he had a play style that was pretty thought through. He was always more in the back lines, a more thinking player. So you think, oh, maybe he can actually do this to a good level. And on Complexity, it was pretty hit and miss, to be honest. And the thing people would always say is, okay, listen, BlameF, you clearly, you get your numbers when you in-game lead, but is it actually good for the team's success? And I think on Astralis, we saw over time, probably not the case. It really felt like, to me at least, that BlameF is someone who's good at calling around his own game, which is very slow and methodical. But that's not always the way to win at Counter-Strike. And I think that was the problem, is that he wanted to call around what suits him best and not necessarily what suits the team best. And I can see why people would be annoyed at that. But I also think when Astralis comes to you and says to you, okay, listen, we want you to be the in-game leader, and he just goes along with it and sort of says, listen, I'll play whatever they want me to. That is a position you're putting yourself in where you are actually somewhat vulnerable now, because he's always clearly a good fragger. He's always clearly a good star player. I think there's no arguing that, even if you call him BaitF. But now you're in a position where you're seen as this in-game leader, and he might have just thought his individual level was too good for him to ever actually be benched, but that's what ends up happening. And I guess it's another story again of, if you're a star player, you might actually not want to become the in-game leader at any point. Like a Yakinda, like all these players that have done it before. And it got to the point where we had threads like this. Now listen, these were jokes. But on this Astralis lineup, people were genuinely getting to the point where they were saying, BlameF pretends to know a Molly lineup so he can bait. It's a joke, but it's always one of those where the joke kind of has a bit of the community sentiment at its heart.
Difficult in this one, but
Oh, he's got
So obviously in a post plant, he's ready to molly the bomb.
the Molotov. Yeah, he's doing the post-plan Molotov, BlameF. And they've got no smoke, so I don't think there's a way they can win this round.
oh, what a heartless
Yeah.
play.
As soon as they tap the bomb, he throws up. There we
Even
go.
before
Oh, he missed it!
He
Okay.
absolutely missed it. Yabi's still on it. That would have been so scary.
Now listen, it worked out nicely in the end. It looked like there was probably one of his teammates on TeamSpeak trying to tell him what the lineup was going to be, and maybe he didn't exactly know it. But either way, those jokes were really coming to prominence during the community. A lot of people actually were low-key thinking like that. And I've got to say, BlameF for me is someone whose pros so massively outweigh his cons that I don't care if you don't like his style of play that much. I don't care if you think he can sometimes bait. His ability is too good to be ignored as a player, in my opinion. Especially because his role and the way he plays is so often the role that can have the least impact on bad teams. If a team is well put together, we've seen it in the past from someone like Rops, for example. When he's been on bad teams, he hasn't actually been able to have that much impact. When he was towards the end of, I think it was Mal's, and that roster was just kind of all over the place, he wasn't really having a lot of impactful rounds. He wasn't winning the team games. But that's because the rest of the structure of the team couldn't really put him in those positions. And the other thing I will say about BlameF is that I know he gets a big reputation as a really lurky player, but I actually think his trade fragging is also exceptional. If you could get him to play more of those roles, you could get so much out of him. And if you look at the stats from 2023 at big events, look down this list, and BlameF is one of the highest rated riflers, up there with Frozen, up there with Nico. Xantares didn't get too many maps at big events, but played very well in them. But he's actually even got better stats than Spinks and Rops and, well, Stown, who has now become his replacement. And I think the thing I will say is that BlameF's stats are probably some of the most inflated in the entire pro scene, partly because of the passive roles he plays, but also partly because I do think he hunts for ecos a little bit more than some other players. But I think he's pretty easy to compare to someone like a Keisarato. A lot of people look at Keisarato on Furia and they say, save Keisarato. We need to save Keisarato. He's the only one going positive. And yeah, he's got a somewhat similar rating to BlameF during this year in 2023. And yet, everyone seems sorry for Keisarato, but I would say when I watch Furia play, a lot of games, Keisarato actually doesn't get to have impact nowadays on Furia because of how bad the core of the lineup is. And I honestly think BlameF was in a similar position, mainly just because of his own calling a lot of the time, to be honest with you. But he's so clearly someone that I think he has to be valuable to a team. He simply has to be. Like, he has too many good abilities to not be valuable to a team. And the only thing that could maybe go against this is maybe he's not that open to changing his game, is what some people would argue, because as I was saying earlier, I think his trade fragging is exceptional, but I don't think he's been on an environment in the past where he's had a well put together enough team for it to actually have a coach or have someone who's going to make him change his game a little bit. I get the vibe that he's kind of always been like the biggest fish on his team in a sense, and maybe that's not true, but that's kind of the feeling I get when looking at BlameF and why he's always played the way he has. And I do think in a perfect world, you'd want him to be a bit more active. But that is such a small con. And someone that gets as many kills and the numbers he gets, I think, has to be valuable. And again, just looking at whatever numbers you want, like in this same year, Keisarato attempts the opening 17% of the time. He wins it 61%. BlameF, actually slightly higher, attempts the entry 18% of the time and is successful 61% of the time. So similar numbers there. And then if you look at it on T side, it is slightly lower. BlameF's down at 16% of the attempt rate, whereas Keisarato, similar actually, 16%. I thought Keisarato was way higher, but no. They're pretty similar in how they play. And so I really find it interesting why the community sentiment around BlameF is different to Keisarato. Because I get it for players that are more successful than BlameF. I think when you look at like a Rops or a Spinks, you say, okay, well, these players can clearly contribute on a team that's winning. And because BlameF hasn't had that in the past, I get why some people have their reservations. I don't see the same around someone like a Keisarato. And I do see them as somewhat similar. And I also think they're obviously both CT side monsters. That's where they can get a lot of their best work done. I think overall, it is so interesting to me, the BlameF point, because yes, Astralis are doing well now. I still think it's a little too early to know long-term where this roster will stand. But even though we've changed game to CS2, even though all these things, BlameF has always played well. Even when he was in-game leading, he's always got numbers. For me, he's always played well. And so I really hope we get to see him on another team. I hope we get to see him on a team that is well put together, that maybe even can bring a bit more out of him activity-wise. Maybe can put him a bit closer to the pack sometimes so he can show his trade fragging potential, which I think is incredibly high. That is why I think a lot of people get frustrated at BlameF, is because you see the pieces there that he is so close to being an incredible player. Genuinely so close to being a top 10 rifler, maybe top 5 rifler in the world. I don't even think he's far off that at times in his career. He's probably been that. But it feels like he's so close to being this incredible player. And yet, it doesn't feel like he always puts himself in the positions to have the most impact. And I think people get really annoyed at that. Again, the best example is Rops. When he was on a struggling team, a failing team, a lot of people were frustrated at Rops as well. And they'd see him as last alive and they'd be like, what are you doing? Why? And I think BlameF's in a similar position. I want to see him on a successful team. I want to see him on a well-structured team. We'll see if we ever get it. But for me, BlameF, not the problem. And it would be a massive shame if we don't get to see this guy on a solid lineup where all the pieces make sense with a good in-game leader at some point in his career, because I don't think he's ever really properly had that. And if we got to see it, I think he could go toe-to-toe with some of the best riflers in his role. We'll see, though. We'll see if we ever get that, because right now, Astralis looking great without him. We will see if BlameF ever gets his flowers. Honestly, right now, not looking great for him, but it would be a hell of a comeback story if he could. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you next time.